Hey everyone, welcome to Full Circle. I'm joining you today from Sun Valley, Idaho. I'm Anderson Cooper. I'm very excited for you to meet our guest tonight because he's really on the cutting edge of fertility treatments to help people realize their dreams of becoming parents. Doctors like him made it possible for me to have my son Wyatt, who's now 14 months old, and obviously I can't imagine my life without Wyatt. My guest tonight is helping a lot of people become parents. He's a pioneer in assisting LGBTQ families like myself. Dr. Bradford Kolb is his name. He's a fertility specialist. He's a pioneer in the field. He's also the president and medical director of HRC Fertility in Pasadena, California. He's also the author of a new book called Love Comes First, Creating LGBTQ Families, which is kind of a guide for people who are interested in becoming parents and going on this process. And Dr. Kolb joins me now. Thanks so much for being with us. I really, really appreciate it. For so many couples, or individuals, this is such a confusing and difficult, expensive process to go through. And in your new book, you explore kind of the many aspects of the fertility process that all intended parents should know, from sperm and egg donation to surrogacy to potentially adoption. How has this kind of journey for gay, lesbian, transgender, queer families evolved since you started doing this in the 90s?
Well, Anderson, first of all, I really appreciate you having me on the show. It's so exciting to be here. And I love that I get to talk about Love Comes First because it's really detailing this journey. And I started in reproductive medicine in the mid-90s, and it was very prohibitive for a single male, a gay male, many people of the spectrum to have children. And so it was most fertility centers would not treat such patients. I started publishing papers in the early 2000s regarding this, and today it's really mainstream. So there's so many accepting practices, fertility practices, offering treatment to people of all the spectrum from LGBTQ. So
even
it's
in the 1990s, even in the 1990s, it wasn't common. I mean, there were a lot of places that would not actually serve gay people.
Very few, and it was somewhat kind of quiet and hush hush, but it's really opened up tremendously.
There have also been remarkable technological developments which have made it much safer for for people considering this. Can you just talk about the changes that you've seen?
Oh, it's been really incredible. When I first started, it was not uncommon to be transferring 3 or 4 embryos to intended parents or surrogates in hopes of getting one to implant. Now the industry standard is to transfer a single embryo. We're much better about evaluating our patients. We're genetically screening the embryos to minimize the risk of transferring genetically abnormal embryos. So it's a much healthier process for an intended mother or surrogate or intended parent going through this whole process. And the advances coming through in this field over the next decade are going to be absolutely amazing.
It's really interesting to me how people who know I have had a son, sort of ask me about the whole process. And there's a lot of people who I thought would obviously kind of know all about it, but really didn't really understand kind of how it worked. Can you just kind of explain a little bit? And obviously there's a lot of different paths, but what's probably the most, for instance, one of the things that a lot of people, don't kind of realize is that there are people who are surrogates, and there are people who are egg donors, and they are not necessarily the same person.
Yeah, and part of it is you may want to share your own journey. Most of our gay couples, it takes them 2 to 3 years about thinking about this process before they even reach out or explore what their options are. And there are many options, as you said. There's foster parenting, adoption, and that's really what we want to emphasize about having healthy families. There's many ways to that path there. But for those going through creating embryos and transferring to a surrogate, usually the egg donor is a very different person than the surrogate carrying the pregnancy. And that's for a variety of reasons. Usually you want your egg donor in their 20s, different characteristics than a surrogate who's had uncomplicated pregnancies, and typically in their 30s.
One of the things that, you see a lot of surrogates, obviously, just the experience I had with my surrogate, surrogates that I've met subsequently, had conversations with, interviews with, it's really there's really something remarkable about women to do this. I mean, that it's a debt. I mean, it's really, I don't know if a calling is the right word, but many of them are people who have families themselves, but have known for a long time that they want to be able to help those who wouldn't otherwise be able to have children.
Yeah, the surrogates and our egg donors, I mean, they're really, really special, wonderful people. They're helping bring life to so many families out there. The surrogates are typically women in their 30s. They've gone through pregnancies, and it's something that they often work through this process themselves, like understanding what it is, how to become a surrogate. So it's a journey for them too. But I mean, some of the happiest people I see in my practice is our surrogates, because they're really bringing people like Wyatt to you, Anderson. I mean, it's such a wonderful journey. They just love being able to give back to the community and to their intended parents.
In terms of technological advances, the other thing which I was stunned when I read about this is that, and you co-founded what's called the HIV-Assisted Reproductive Technologies Program. It's now possible, and I don't think a lot of people realize this, it's now possible for someone who's HIV positive to safely have a child. How does that happen? How does that work?
Yeah, so our whole mantra in reproductive medicine is about helping create healthy families. And so years ago, we founded the HEART program, and it's really about formalizing the process of isolating the sperm from any viral contaminants. It's about how to treat the surrogates going through this to really eliminate the risk of transmitting HIV to the surrogate or to the embryo. And we've had over 300 pregnancies to HIV positive men, and we've never had a transmission of the virus to the baby or to the surrogate. So it's something that we're advancing on all fronts as far as bringing parenthood to intended parents.
So, I mean, do you? I mean, I assume what HIV is present in sperm, right? So, how do you deal with that?
Well, it's in the ejaculate. It's not on the sperm itself, and it's not in the sperm cell. So we're able to isolate just the sperm cells from like white blood cells, contaminants, and fluid inside the ejaculate. So we're isolating just the sperm cells. There's also something about the science of about inoculum. You have to have a certain amount of virus to actually contract an infectious disease. And it's really, if you think through this process and look at the science, it's nearly impossible to conceive how a sperm can carry enough virus that might be attached to the surface of it into an egg and an embryo. So the science, as far as us isolating that sperm and some of the procedures and precautions we take with the surrogate really have essentially eliminated that risk to the baby and to the surrogate.
Yeah. I mean, I should also point out for those who don't realize that anybody who's undetectable, who has HIV but is undetectable because they take, a daily pill, they can't transfer HIV to a sexual partner even with the technology, with the pill, with the medicine that exists today. The cost for gay families, for any family, to go through the fertility, it's so expensive. And obviously, as you said, I mean, the process can take a long time. Is there any hope that in the future that cost will go down?
Yeah, I think that's the most heartbreaking factor to this whole process is the cost, especially for our gay men, single intended fathers, some of our trans patients as well, because the cost of surrogacy and egg donation is really prohibitive to many intended parents. You're talking well over $100,000 just to achieve that pregnancy. So some of the steps that intended parents will take is they'll bring in their own egg donor and surrogate to help minimize that cost. But there's other steps that are being taken. Certain insurance benefits that are now being extended to individuals for fertility treatments are extending those benefits to gay couples and everybody within the LGBTQ community. So it's important that we all continue to press our employers, our politicians, to really bring about equality in these insurance benefits to help those patients that really need that financial assistance.
A lot of women who are concerned about, aging and their ability to have kids later on. Maybe they're working, they don't currently want to get pregnant. Freeze eggs. Does that? I've read different things about it. Does that work?
Yeah, so that kind of falls under the guise of something called fertility preservation. So women, unfortunately, start to lose their fertility in their late 20s, early 30s. And by the time they're in their 40s, a lot of women have lost their fertility. So by freezing their eggs or embryos, if they're with a partner, it allows them to essentially put a hold on time. So if I have a 30-year-old and I freeze her eggs, she can come back and use those eggs 10, 20 years in the future. And the chance of getting pregnant from those eggs would be as if I was using them when she was 30 years old. Men have a little bit of a pass on this, the aging process. Men typically don't start to lose their fertility until their 50s. So it's really, this is more of a conversation for a lot of the women viewing this broadcast.
And is it? And that's just. That works. The egg frozen, it can be unfrozen and it's viable.
Yeah, it's really important that we understand what somebody's fertility is when we freeze that egg. So there's that basic evaluation. It's also important to know that it's not a guarantee of a future pregnancy. But yeah, it works really well. It's really, we're seeing a lot more individuals, mostly single women, freezing their eggs for the future because they're not ready to have children at this point in their lives. So it can work really quite well.
What advice would you give to people out there who are watching this or thinking about this or dreaming about it? They're members of the LGBTQ community or anybody else that might feel discouraged or it seems like such an overwhelming process. What's your advice to people who are starting out?
Well, I think the most important thing is don't push off that conversation. You want to start looking at what your options are. So there's some really great websites you can start exploring some of this information. Lovecomesfirst.com is the nonprofit arm of the book. Family Equality is another wonderful organization that promotes family building and equality within the LGBTQ community. American Society of Reproductive Medicine has wonderful educational modules for patients. Start looking at what your treatment options are. Start exploring what that family looks like for you. If it's not through an egg donor and surrogate, maybe it's foster parenting, maybe it's adoption. And then talk to people in your community. Talk to people that may have gone through this to understand this process. It shouldn't be a scary process. There's a lot of education that you need. You want to talk to people that are educated in this field, like fertility experts. But there's a lot of wonderful resources out there. Start exploring what your options are and start understanding what the future looks like for that family. If you are going to be using your egg or sperm or carrying a pregnancy, really focus on getting your health optimized before you start any treatment. For example, stopping smoking, getting your weight optimized, really to help create the healthiest pregnancy that you can.
How many babies have you brought into the world?
Oh gosh, I try to think
bring into the world. I guess I should say.
Yeah, I have a very busy practice over the years. My estimation is that somewhere over about 8,000. It's just, yeah.
That's incredible.
Anderson, I'm incredibly blessed. I have the greatest job in the world, and yeah. So I look forward to many
amazing.
More families. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for all you do. Love Comes First is the book. Dr. Bradford Kolb, really appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much. If I can just give a little plug for the book here. Lovecomesfirst.com, a wonderful website. So it has a lot of video content for anybody looking at their fertility options. But thank you, Anderson. Thank you very much for having me.
It's a great resource, and the website there is on the screen, lovecomesfirst.com. Thanks so much. We're putting the website, as I said, on screen also for familyequality.org. It's the website Dr. Kolb mentioned for anyone looking for help starting their own families. Again, that's familyequality.org as well as lovecomesfirst.com. We'll be back 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday. Remember, you can stream the show anytime by going to cnn.com/fullcircle.